I received a hot tip prior to this, and I wanted to check into it. We don't have to go into it if you don't want to. Now it sounds like I'm going to talk about something really dramatic. It's not. But Nick, is it true that you were the mechanic for Lance Armstrong during the
True.
2010 tour? Oh, do you have anything
No, I'm
more than
trying to
that
get
about
the Oprah response.
about work?
It's just the Oprah
I mean,
response. True or false? Yeah, I was.
okay,
I was one of his mechanics.
okay. True or false? You worked on Lance's bike. You were one of his mechanics. He had multiple mechanics on.
No,
Did he have
we
one
always
just
worked as
on
a
his
team.
bike?
Like in most World Tour teams, you have especially for a Grand Tour, you have gosh, it could be 3 to 5 mechanics depending on what stage. You know, you'd bring in extra mechanics for time trial stages and things like that, rotate through in the cars, stuff like that. So mostly, I was just the guy who had the lucky job of washing a matte white bicycle and trying to keep it looking clean. So yeah, it had its challenges, but it was a lot of fun.
Okay. And would you have two mechanics per bike? Was that like an Atul Gawande checklist manifesto type thing so you're making sure everything's done according to protocol? Or was that for plausible deniability so that if something broke,
No,
you could just
honestly,
blame the other
it's more of a
person?
division of labor thing. It isn't like a certain person is assigned a certain bike. We just take certain roles within the day. So someone's going to be in the car, someone's going to be washing the bikes when they come back, and then post wash, someone else is going to do a check through on them. So it's much more of a division of labor across a set of tasks than it is like someone assigned to a given rider's bike.
Okay. So let's just get right into this. You are a gravel power couple. Let's talk a little bit about how did you go to the top of the gravel power couple rankings? Because I'd say you're probably number one currently. I know that at other times you've been like on number 3 to number 7 on the list, but right now I'd put you at
It's
number one.
amazing.
How does it
We're
feel?
basking.
Oh man.
It's been a long time coming, though. I mean, I guess what it really comes down to is we've been in this space for quite
Yeah.
a long time, and Kristen's been knocking on the door of some pretty big results for years, and this year at XL, she really broke through, which was super exciting for both of us.
Okay, you thought
Yeah.
I was kidding. You thought I was kidding about being the number one on the Choose the Hard Way gravel power couple rankings, but you truly are at the top. It's official. I'm giving you the award on this episode, and yeah, I mean, you've been around gravel forever, and it is a long time coming. And Kristen, congratulations, of course, on your victory this year. I know that a lot of people want to hear about that. They may want to hear a bit more about your dark secret past as a triathlete.
Oh
So
no, don't out me.
yeah,
Come on.
yeah, I know. But do you want to talk a little bit about just as a couple, what went into planning for and preparing for winning the race this year? Because I have to think this is the culmination of a lot of work. And, you're out there doing all the pedaling, Kristen, but you have so much knowledge to bring to bear from a training point of view, from an equipment point of view. And did Nick mess up anything on your bike before the event?
No, not at all. Yeah, no, we definitely approach this as a team. And so it's been really fun to get to, come on here and talk as a team as well, because this is our win. I definitely look at it that way. And we do that, on both sides. When Nick has events, we're working together. I coach him, and when I'm racing, he's helping me a lot with equipment and just trying to keep me sane out there as well. But yeah, going into this year, I think it was one of the first years I really came to him and was just like, I want to go all in on this. I really want this win. I think I can do it if I commit to it. And I gave him pretty much free rein to say, like, you're the equipment expert. You know how to make bikes fast. So I'm gonna look to you to really set things up for me. And we worked together, and obviously made some decisions together, and making sure the bike worked well, just from a speed perspective, but also from just a comfort and actually wanting to ride it for 26 hours. So we worked on that together throughout the season, and then yeah, same thing with training. Even I coach myself, but I definitely look to Nick as somebody to bounce ideas off of, and keep me pushing when maybe I don't want to, or actually probably more than more than that, he's telling me to go rest a little bit more when I'm getting really cranky or getting mad at him. He's like, okay, I think your training's good. Time to get some rest in there. So.
What do you find to be the hardest thing about working with each other?
Fatigue.
It's a good question because yeah, we work together not only as, training and life, but we also work together on our professional side of things as well. So we end up spending a lot of time together. But I think it's great because we get to support each other out there, and thankfully we have some time apart, and that's always a welcome, change for a little bit, but then it just makes getting back together and working together that much better.
Okay, you must be very well media
Well,
trained.
yeah,
I totally didn't answer
I'll
the
chime
question.
in to say that I think there's
What do
two
you have?
things, which is really good self-awareness and then just really honest check-ins with each other. Like, hey, is now a moment to talk about this? And, we've all been in those relationships or those scenarios where it clearly wasn't a teaching or a learning moment or even a sharing moment. It was a, shut the hell up moment. And I think us just being honest with that and just understanding and compassionate with ourselves and each other, it really goes a long way.
Were there any specific moments, like in the 24 hours before the race or even in the week leading up to it, when anything went unexpectedly that you hadn't planned for? I
It
imagine
rained.
you've got to be preppers, like with the stuff that you all do. Yeah. Okay. You had the rain. So the rain was unexpected. Did you not plan
No,
for
we had
a
all
mud
those
scenario?
scenarios.
I think, yeah, from that side of things. But yeah, no, I think we were really well prepared. Yeah, I was really relaxed going into the race. Nick was working Unbound. He was there, so we actually weren't hanging out too much together because he was just over at the expo all day. So yeah, so it was pretty smooth actually. Like really things did kind of, the stars aligned for this race, and then no big
But
catastrophes
we
or
also
anything ahead
carved
of
out
time.
time to be quiet and just
Okay.
away from the hustle and bustle of Unbound, because it's incredible and it's exciting to be around the gravel family, but it's also draining. So we had an Airbnb that we booked personally on our own dime just to have a quiet space to go back to, and so that Kristen could hole up, and not be social if she didn't feel like being social. So there was a lot of forethought that went into that.
And with the Airbnb, I'm curious. The last time that I did Unbound 100 3 times. I don't really have any desire to do the 200, and there's no way in hell I'm ever doing the XL. So again, congratulations on winning it. But the experience that I had the last time I did the 100, housing was so tight. I ended up staying in the dorm, which was, it's great that they provide that option. It's not one that I recommend to other humans who like to sleep. And that dorm is right next to wherever the train is. So there's just like a train every 30 minutes. Did you have a lot of train disruptions to your sleep during the week? And I mean, I'm like, my sleep setup it's over the top. I'm like, I tape my mouth. I've got an eye mask, silicone earplugs, like the whole deal. I don't know what
Yeah.
you do, but what was that like for you from a train point of view?
Thankfully, we were far enough north of town, so you didn't hear the trains too much. But knowing, I think that goes back to, we've been going out to Unbound for, Nick's been going to it for over a decade, and we know the town really well. So when we're booking things or when we're like deciding on those accommodations, we take a lot of that into account because it is hard. I haven't ever gotten to stay in the dorms. So some year, I think it would just be
Amanda
fun to
Nauman loves it.
experience that.
No, you
Amanda
don't want to
Nauman
do
loves
that.
them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. She must be made of different stuff than me. She must be way tougher. Better sleeper, probably.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I know most of what I know about your ride. I've read interviews with you and I've listened to quite a few things, but I also last night or 2 nights ago, I watched Tyler Vegan Cyclist video, which you feature very prominently in.
Right.
You of course beat him and you beat everyone in your race. But he had a lot of footage of you. And I'm just wondering, did you have any dialogue with him during the race?
Yeah, we were in a pretty small group. I think probably like, probably 6 to 8 of us, for quite a while in the first 100 miles or so. And so I ended up riding with him quite a bit. I was riding in his group through that section. and was just, checking in, saying hi to everybody, learning more about them. But then we hit the mud section together. And so that was where, it's the first point where you have to think about how to take care of your bike and what's going on and how you're going to keep moving forward. And so, yeah, I think Tyler and I got through that mud section pretty close together, and we kept kind of crossing paths from that point on. But didn't, there was so much mud, it was really hard to ride with people. Like you would maybe pass somebody because they've stopped to fix their bike, or they pass you because you're stopping to clear mud. And so you say hi and then they ride past. But I did end up running into him. I rolled up on him just about to the second checkpoint kind of town at mile 150, because his light, I guess, had stopped working, one of the lights he was using. And so I roll up on him and he doesn't have any lights. And so it was just like, oh my gosh, like it's 2 a.m. right now and pitch dark and stuff. And so thankfully we were pretty close to town. So I just, was like, get on my wheel. I pointed my light a little bit to the side so that he'd have a clear view of the road. And we rode into the checkpoint together at that point. And then he went on to try and figure out how to fix his light.
And the bigger mud section that was in the XL, it sounded like it went on for, was it several hours? Like how long was it, and what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, it was I think we had about 11 miles in total of mud, and that section I think was 7. I went back and looked at my little GPS track, and I think it was about 7 straight miles of mud. So yeah, a couple of hours, I would say, right in there. And it's I knew the course pretty well, and I knew that this section, once we hit the mud, I was like, well, the road doesn't change conditions for quite a while. So if this section is muddy, I know it's going to be muddy for a while. So thankfully, I kind of had a good perspective of just, settle in. This is time to, we're in it now. We really have to just focus on how to get through it efficiently. But I actually had I don't know, it's easy to look back now and be like, oh, it wasn't so bad. But I had a blast out there. I mean, it was a total adventure race, and, it wasn't just, sitting on somebody's wheel and trying to, keep a certain pace. It was, pushing your bike and getting your bike up and over big rocks and, clearing the mud and figuring out how to get through there. So I was in pretty good spirits for most of it. But I'm sure there were some darker moments at times where I just don't remember those anymore.
Were you wearing, this is probably beyond the scope of what my audience might actually be interested in, but I'm definitely interested in it. But yeah, so Tyler in his video talked about how he had tested and he had determined that wearing road shoes was the best thing to do for walking on gravel roads or walking in mud. I might have to get him on here. I'm sorry. This interview is not about him. There were some interesting things in his video that I was like, wow, that's like, this is some West Coast mysticism here. That seemed personally, it seemed very odd to me. Were you wearing road shoes or mountain bike shoes or what?
Yeah, I was on SBD pedals and cleats and mountain bike shoes for sure. That's the only thing I even race in anymore. But you couldn't get me to ride road shoes out there ever. That's just clearing the mud would just be such a pain, I think. So yeah, I was in mountain bike stuff, and thankfully I have a cyclocross background, so being able to kind of jump on the bike and pedal without being able to clip in, and just kind of work your cleats and your pedals in together was something I'd done before and knew how to do.
And on the spectrum of athletic or life events that you have been through, where would you put the level of difficulty of this event? Because you, of course, have done it before, but was this harder, easier, about the same?
I would say it was actually physically easier than another year that I've done XL. And maybe that's just because I knew what I was getting myself into a little bit more. I kind of knew what to expect and how it was going to feel. But it was definitely mentally the hardest thing. I think that was what I was most tired, most drained from after the race, was just the mental of trying to be focused and taking care of your bike and making sure you're, checking all of the boxes. And in some ways the mud made the bike, you had to kind of baby your bike the rest of the race. And so you really couldn't go really hard. Like there was never a moment where I was just like, cranking and just like breathing hard. And it was a really steady effort because I didn't want to, tear a derailleur hanger off or, do anything silly once we were past the mud. So not the most physically challenging, but I think the most mentally challenging for sure.
And for you, what was the crux moment of the race when you were mentally at your lowest?
It was actually past all of the mud and into the second day of riding, and the temperatures started rising, and it was just getting really hot. There was no cloud cover, and you're already kind of behind on nutrition and hydration. And so when I was rolling into a little town, Hamilton, which in my original plans of pacing and where I thought we would be, I didn't think that store would be open for me. I thought I would be there sooner, but then obviously the mud hit and the plans went out the window. So I got to that store when it was open, and it was definitely a low point, but it was also a high point because they had this big ice machine out front, or like where you can buy some ice. And so I just sat down and basically made a bunch of ice socks and put them everywhere I could and tried to cool myself off. So that was a rough spot, but thankfully got through it with help of some ice.
Did you think about just crawling into the ice machine?
Yeah, except that would have been horribly disgusting the amount of mud everywhere. I felt so bad for every store we went in. I was just like, I'm so sorry. I'll try not to touch anything that I don't have to because I'm disgusting right now.
This might seem like a bit of a tangent, but I think it's a really important topic. And unfortunately, I haven't really heard anyone touch on this. So we're going to get a little bit serious here for a minute. But when we think about those poor Casey's general stores out there in the middle of nowhere, and they know that the riders are coming. And I know that both of you have been in the position of like rolling into these general stores, almost like zombie-like characters and just cleaning them out, maybe throwing some money on the counter and then walking out. Like, what goes down inside of Casey's? And do you think that this is an ethical thing?
Yeah, no, actually, I think that's a really important question to discuss. And I haven't seen it discussed too much because I've heard that the first town we got to in Cottonwood Falls this year, that there was some pretty unfavorable situations going on. Like people, there were some people throwing money at the cash register, being like, "Here, this should cover it," and walking out. And these people, they're like the workers at the gas stations. All of them were so friendly. Every time I talked to them, they were like running around, like, "How can I help you?" They were really into it and helpful. But I think by the time, a lot of people got through that first one, because we were so close together, everybody was in kind of a rush, that it wasn't a very nice situation. And so I hope that there's, maybe a bit more of a truce or something happening in the front group where they say, let's go through this calmly. Let's make sure everybody can purchase their product and not overwhelm the stores. But yeah, that was a bummer to hear about.
There's a classy way to handle that, though. Like you could all go in and like everyone doing that race can probably afford to buy the next three people's stuff. You can settle up. I mean, there's Venmo. There's a classy way to handle this, and we just haven't kind of. I would put this on the riders. I don't think it's up to the organization to do that. The organization is giving those Casey's a heads up. Everyone knows what's about to happen. I rode that Cottonwood Falls Casey's the day after Unbound, just on a personal ride, and they told me like, "Hey, is that event over?" And they were like relieved because they had kind of a pretty rough day, or at least a rough couple of hours there. So it's not cool. You got to respect these people. They have an inventory to manage, and I think it is an important question as well. These are tiny, in some cases, communities that welcome us, and we repay them. That's a pun, by throwing money at them, and that's just not very cool.
Yeah, can you imagine being behind the counter?
Hey,
maybe your manager.
They could just lock the door. All they have to, they hold all the power. That's what people don't recognize when they're being less than polite. Is all they have to do is lock the door, and your day's over. So think about that.
Yeah, and I have to imagine that when you're in there, have you ever like been in a face-off over a specific item? Like it's the last thing of junior mints. That's like all you've been thinking about for 125 miles is like, all I want is the junior mints. And you get there and somebody with a muddy paw in front of you swipes those up, throws a 50 at the counter and walks out.
I've fought over a Casey's breakfast sandwich before, but it wasn't really much of a fight. It was just the last one with bacon. So instead I got sausage, like it all worked out, but yeah, nothing too epic.
Okay. Yeah. How about you, Kristen? You ever had a showdown in Casey's?
Never a showdown, no, but I have gotten there and like all of the Gatorades are gone or something, and you're just like, oh no, like what do I do now? And so it was a bit of a shock to be like, oh, all right, we're trying something new.
And your plan this year, if I recall correctly, you just had your, I don't know what brand your frame bag
Mhm.
is, but it was just stuff full of mix, right?
Yeah, so kind of going back to the topic of the convenience stores, I was
Yeah.
worried that it was going to be this manic dash into these stores, and I didn't want to get caught out. I really wanted to be in the group. I wanted to, make sure I was in the lead women's group, whatever that was. And so I wanted to make sure I didn't have to purchase anything. So I was going to go in, fill up my water bottles in the sink or in the bathroom, and then just put mix in. And then I brought enough, solid foods in my dispersed frame bag, and so that's what I did. And I actually, that first convenience store, I didn't experience it because there's a park right next door to it, and I knew there was a water fountain there that I could fill up my pack and my bottles with. So I never actually went to that Casey's and didn't actually see the chaos that was happening. So thankfully, because I think that would have been kind of a bummer to see in the middle of the race. So I'm just hearing it after the fact. But yeah, I used just drink mix for the first two stops for the most part.
Did you all do a tactical survey earlier in the week? Had you like been to those checkpoints and like seen, you're like, yeah, I'm going straight to this water fountain. And as we all know, water fountain flow rates vary. I mean, you could be there,
Yeah,
right? Like
right,
you could have a trickle. You show up.
right.
They're still like running some COVID protocol. The things shut off. Like who knows? So did you go there ahead of time and check all those things out?
Yeah, I was out in Emporia in early May for another gravel race and just to get some time. So I spent about 10 days out there doing the race, but then also getting time on the course and pre-riding a lot of the sections I don't know. Thankfully, I've been out there quite a bit, so I knew a lot of the roads. So I was just pre-riding the stuff I hadn't ridden before, and in that had gone and checked out all of the stops along the way. And then Nick and I, the week of Unbound, went out and finished that up together and kind of found that water fountain because I knew that was there, but I was like, well, I don't know if it will actually work or if it makes sense. And so we went out and just scouted it.
How did Nick do during the
Barely hung
scouting week?
on.
Rate his performance, like yeah, like 1 to 10. How did Nick do?
Totally 10. It was great because
Okay.
he has such a different perspective to it. And so, and he helps me kind of think about things in a different way. So it was really helpful.
Did you make any adjustments after you checked everything out?
Not I mean, other than the water fountain, I think everything was pretty much. It was more about just making sure you knew where things were in the store, so you could go, as you saying, like go directly
Yeah.
to the fountain and that kind of thing. So, the only thing I changed was I was planning on not going, buying anything at the second stop, but at that point, the race had blown up enough that it didn't matter. It wasn't a mad rush to get through, so I went in and bought a Red Bull and some Pop Tarts because that sounded great at the time. So that was the biggest change.
How many hours were you putting in on your biggest training rides before going and doing this event?
Maybe less than you
Um,
expect, actually.
it's a good question. I need
Kristen's
to look
pretty
back at it.
targeted. I mean, the point isn't to just,
Yeah.
completely deplete yourself. It's to build yourself up. So a lot of the training that Rambleur, that her coaching business does, isn't about like mega volume. It's about fitting it into a life that has a family and a partner and a job. So don't mean to talk over you, Kristen, but
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think, like on average I was getting like 10 to 12 hour weeks in on the bike, and then had a few weeks where I just targeted, trying to get 16 to 18 hours or so, but I have a big background in endurance, so I can lean on that a little bit more than maybe somebody who's getting into the sport and doesn't have that experience quite so much. But yeah, I think I typically train a lot less than other folks, just focusing on the rest and recovery side of it a bit more.
All right. I definitely want to come back to the XL and go deeper on that. But Nick, I'm curious, like you wrote the book on gravel, right? You're the man. And for you, what's the longest event that you personally have done? And let's set aside bike packing. Let's just go with competition, or we could go with bike packing competition. There, of course, there are things like the Atlas Mountain Race, like there's just so many of these things now where people like, I'm going to go do a race that's 3,000 miles. I guess maybe that's Ram. I don't know. But what's been the
Oh, well,
outer
Tour
limit
Divide. I
for
mean,
you?
if we're willing to include bikepacking, multi-day bikepacking, Tour Divide is my biggest achievement or longest achievement, so to speak. But in a single push, it was probably the now defunct TransIowa, which was 340 miles. And just it's in April. They now have an event called Iowa Wind and Rock that has kind of taken up the mantle of TransIowa. TransIowa was a very OG gravel event. It was the inspiration for what became Unbound, in fact. And it was all cue sheets. It was no GPS, no navigational items. You're not allowed to carry a GPS on it. And you would get cue sheets to the first checkpoint, and you'd have to make the time cut, and they'd hand you the next set of cue sheets. And what makes that especially difficult is you don't know how to meter your effort if there's a headwind, because you don't know if you're going to be in it for an hour or 4 hours or 20 minutes, because until you get the next cue sheet, it's one big loop. So it's really good mind whacking. Like you just have to kind of be present and deal, which is pretty cool. But that's a bit different. There's less prep that you can do for events like that. Whereas something like an Unbound XL, a Tour Divide, you can spend a lot of time researching and kind of turning yourself inside out and second guessing everything.
TransIowa, now defunct. What year did you do
that? I did two. Well, I started two. Yeah, it was 2018, wasn't it?
2018.
Yeah. I think I started 2016 and no one finished that year, because Mother Nature wins whenever she decides to on things like that. And it was just horrible. It rained all night. And again, like one guy, Greg Gleason, made the first checkpoint and then went off solo for 100 and something miles, and everyone else was like, well, have fun. And then in 2018 we still had some pretty good adversity, but that's a particularly tough one too because of how, by design, Unbound XL is a really hard event, and I never want to diminish anyone's efforts out there, but the way that you start on a Friday evening and ride through the first night relatively fresh, and then you ride into the Saturday, whereas TransIowa and Iowa Wind and Rock start at 4 a.m. So you start in the dark for a couple hours. It's in April, so the conditions are typically worse, spring conditions in Iowa. You ride all through the day, and then you ride through the entire night. So you're doing that with a lot more accumulated fatigue. So yeah, which is great. I think all of those things they're just it's such an interesting set of factors that race promoters, organizers can play with and manipulate to create a different experience.
It's really interesting that you're bringing up TransIowa. For me, that was a point of origin for my interest in gravel. Not that matters to anyone, but I guess it matters to me. I became aware of, I don't remember how I became aware of the event, but I had a column in Mountain Bike magazine. It was really more of like a news roundup type thing, and around like 2004, 2005. And I heard about TransIowa. I talked to Jeff and Ted, and I like wrote a brief piece about it. And then from then forward, I was very gravel curious. And I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Missouri, and I did RAGBRAI twice. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Not a gravel event, but yeah, the Register's annual Great Bicycle Ride across Iowa. Later, things got super weird with that event. I don't even know what's going on with it now. But I don't know if you remember it, like split into two events. There was like
it's celebrating its 50th anniversary
thing going
month.
On.
It's still going strong.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right on. It's it's an amazing ride. If anybody out there has the opportunity to do it, definitely go check it out. One of the features, of course, of that, I wouldn't know if I would call it a feature, but if you're in Iowa in the middle of the summer, you're going to get tornadoes. So perhaps that's why TransIowa happened in the spring. But that event really captured my imagination. It's what later led me to decide to go do a much shorter and less challenging event. At the time, the Dirty Kansas Half Pint 100. But for both of you, what draws you to these types of sick events? Like, what's wrong with you?
Short-term memory. No, for me, I think I like the really long stuff, particularly because it's not as much about a race against another person or, trying to get a time, that kind of thing. It's more about the being out there and like having to deal with the conditions, anything that kind of can come up in the longer rides. And also just how to deal with your body through it. So it's more of this kind of mental, physical, like personal challenge out there. We're still racing, I'm still trying to win a race, but it's a lot more than, again, just like putting yourself in the right place in a peloton or making sure you're getting the right bottle hand ups. It's much more of this kind of, I got to take care of myself. I have to keep checking in with myself, and can I actually do it? Can I finish this thing? Which I think, no matter what race you're doing or how well you are, I think there's a point out there that you ask yourself that, like, really, like, can I keep doing this, or at least at this pace? And you have to kind of answer that. And I think it's exciting to see what we come up with out there. Sometimes we back off and need to, take it easy and take care of ourselves. And sometimes you can dig a little bit deeper, and it's pretty cool when that happens, because I think that just like allows you to level up the next time, because you can go that deep. You can really like reach within and find that level.
So is it about getting to that point and seeing if you answer the call? Is that what it's about for you?
I think so. I think there's a lot. It's hard to narrow it down into that, but it is this. Yeah, I like to ride hard. I like to go deep, and these events really allow for you to do something. It's hard to do that on your own, just to go out and I'm going to go ride for 26 hours and see what I can do. But an event really, gives you the opportunity, I guess is the way to say it, to find that level.
I mean,
Nick, how
look,
about
we're
for
we're
you?
on a podcast right now called Choose the Hard Way. We're not alone. I think that there's incredible value in that, and there's incredible value in discovering other people who are like-minded. It's very much about self-discovery for me, and it's very much about connection with others for me. And um, I have people and friends that one of my best friends to this day is a guy I slept on the floor next to at a host house in 2011, my first Unbound, and the guy performed our wedding ceremony, Kristen and I. So, you meet amazing people, amazing, transformative people. Um, that's pretty tough to beat. You find human connection. So I think there are a lot of good reasons, and it's up to each of us to kind of decide what that is. But yeah, for me, there's just no turning back. It's I mean, Kristen now and I, we've both kind of built our life around this, in many ways, and it's as much of a lifestyle as it is anything else, and it's kind of just supporting one another in this, and what's the next big thing we want to undertake as a team. It's pretty cool.
Do you all find, kind of going back to this idea of, I love, Nick, I love what you said about just like the relational element of it. Like, yeah, there is this amazing community around, I mean, people find it around all different kinds of sports. There is something quite interesting, I think, about cycling, because your community lifts you up. It also hurts you intentionally, right? And that's one of the ways that the community lifts you up, is by putting you into these uncomfortable positions physically and mentally sometimes. So it's like, that's just part of the nature of what we do. And then other times it's more relaxed, but that's certainly part of what's fun about the sport. What do you think about when you think about something that's like going too far, or that's beyond the scope of what you have any interest in doing? What is that? I mean, Nick, you mentioned Tour Divide. How
Tour
far is
Divide is
Tour
right
Divide?
around 2,700 miles on mostly dirt roads from Banff, Canada to the Mexican border in Antelope Wells, New Mexico. Um, that's pretty far, and it's self-supported, right? So again, like, you're not supposed to be drafting other people, sharing resources, et cetera. It's out there, man. I mean, I didn't even finish the thing until my fourth attempt in 2018, and like, I was very much like, I don't know if this is possible for me, and it's why I kept going back. And that's all relative. I mean, that's up to each and every one of us to, well, if we choose to discover, like, what is too much. And it's so case specific. I mean, on a given day, it can change. Um, but I think it's cool that those challenges exist. I mean, I love that no one finished that TransIowa, the first one I tried. I love that. I think that's amazing that nature won, that the course designer, Guitar Ted, and Mother Nature beat us all. And I think that's fantastic because I don't think it's always a race promoter's job to make people feel good about themselves. I think it's great when we have to tuck tail, go home, recollect ourselves, and figure it out. How do we go better next time? Or how do we roll the dice and get luckier with conditions? Um, and I think it's that relationship with the unknown that is so compelling to me. That you just don't know what's going to happen out there despite all the prep in the world, and that's exciting if you choose to see it that way.
How about you, Kristen?
Yeah. Nick definitely he's a big inspiration to me in a lot of the stuff he does with the longer events and bikepacking and some things. And I always joke that I'm a few years behind him. So if he's tried something, maybe a few years down the road, I'll give it a try because he makes it look pretty fun. But I will say that there's one thing that, for me at least, so you're kind of getting into the, not interested in going that hard or that deep, is something that Nick's gotten into recently, and that's the like snow bike packing. So looking at like the ITI race and that kind of stuff. And for me, again, I won't say never, I'll never say never with it because I know myself well enough with that. But that stuff's really scary to me, and it's something that I'm not ready to take on or even consider at this point because it's extreme up there. So that's something that's, yeah, it's fun to have those things that you're just like, nope, I know my limit. That's not
Well,
something
and
I'm
speaking to that,
interested in doing.
sorry, Andrew, but speaking
When
to
you
that point,
mentioned
like I don't think anyone should. That's what's interesting about this world too, is like I've said for years that like no one should be talked into
Mhm.
Unbound 200 because that's just setting them up for failure or a bad time. If you're not interested in it or compelled to do it, don't. And I think that people forget that this is all optional. We're all opting in, and no one else. You don't have to. The snow stuff scares the living daylights out of me too. The winter stuff. But I'm kind of, I feel compelled to explore it at least. It's interesting.
Yeah, I'm not choosing the
Exactly.
Unbound 200. I don't, you know what? I mean, never say never though. Honestly, like watching, I can't believe, God, I can't believe I'm saying this, but seeing all the Unbound hype, and it is just crazy to me. I I can't tell you. I mean, you all are probably the same. How much I've read or listened to about there was some mud on a road in Kansas, right? I mean, it's absolutely bananas. And when you think about what we're talking about, and yeah, the whole thesis of this show, which is hard things build stronger people, hard things are fun to do, that doesn't always mean that you electively are designing the challenge that you're facing. And I think that you made a really interesting uh, point, both of you, that when you're opting into doing some kind of adventure, whether it's you're going to do a bike race for other people, I don't know. It could be anything. It could be they're going to try to solve a mathematical theorem. I don't know. Like whatever the case may be, you're going to do a puzzle that's got 10,000 pieces and it's a monochrome puzzle. I've talked to people who do that. That's not one I personally want to tackle. No thanks. It's just really interesting to me what happens, as you said, Nick, when the challenge is unknown and when you don't know when it's going to stop. That's when it gets quite interesting to me. And I'm really curious with both of you. I ask a lot of my guests this question, but this idea of domain specific
Mm.
resilience is really interesting to me. Like you all do these, these far out, really long, intense bike adventures. I've done whatever. I've done a bunch of bike stuff, not the same stuff you all have, not at the same level, but that's fine. Like that's the manner in which I participated in it. Part of what I find to be really interesting is, what do I do when one of my children perhaps has a tantrum or I'm in traffic and somebody cuts me off? Am I going to get pissed off? Or am I just like, wow, here's an opportunity to expand the elasticity of my patience and compassion for other human beings, to try to relax into what's happening and not freak out? And I'm curious for you all, do you find that what you're experiencing on the bike and getting into these situations, does it transpose into other areas of your life? And in what ways, if so, or if not? I finished my monologue, so go
Yeah,
ahead.
no,
Yeah.
good. I mean, does anything help with like getting stuck in a traffic jam? I don't know if there's any mindset that can get you through that feeling okay, but I don't know. Nick, what do you think on this? I feel like it definitely just is a state of being. It's kind of a mindset, but it's also not always there, like whether it's a race or it's work or, frustration with your house, something going on in your house. You're going to have those highs and lows. Sometimes you're going to approach the problem with grace and calm, and sometimes you're going to freak out and yell about it. And I think it's all of it just takes practice. And I'm sure it bleeds over from one discipline or domain to the other. And, but yeah, I don't know. I haven't like sat down to think about it personally. Like, am I different now from, 8 years ago? I'm sure I think about things differently because of the bike. But it's been this gradual kind of change, I'm sure, that I don't recognize.
I actually have pretty
Maybe
strong
Nick,
feelings
maybe
on
you
this
do.
one, which is to say that if we're not learning and applying what we're learning outside of our sport or domain, then what's the point? Because otherwise, it seems to me like it's just a lot of vanity. If I'm not figuring out ways to be in my world and show up as a better human, then I feel like I'm just stagnant, or worse, I'm getting worse. So I'm not saying that or anyone on this call can apply that perfectly at all. We're still humans. But I feel pretty strongly that a lot of the work that I have done on myself and try to do is around mindset more than anything. And then really for me, it's mindset first, and then it's applying that to my work life, my personal life, my sporting life. I find that I can often sport gives us the space to do that. Like, we're encouraged to do that in that space. And I think that everyone can identify, maybe not everyone, but a whole lot of people can identify with sport, and that's why I think that it's so interesting. But to me, it should be universally applicable. Doesn't mean we're good at it, but I think it should be.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine, and he recently was in Europe doing a really cool and very challenging bike experience, like a road riding tour kind of thing, multi-day, about a week long, really big, hard rides every day, and was posting about it a lot on social media. And I love this person, but it's a really interesting example. Then on the way back, I don't know, they flew from Europe. They were in New York. I don't know what's going on. There was maybe it was the air quality thing. I don't know, but they ended up getting stranded at
Yeah,
JFK for like 2 days.
Oh,
So he's like, he did one of those posts where he's
yeah,
like putting United on blast on Instagram, as I'm sure tens of thousands of other people were. And it was like, I've been in this line for 7 hours, and like I finally collapsed and fell asleep on my rolly bag and blah, 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 blah. And, can you help me,
totally.
etc. I get it. There are a few things more frustrating than I'm stuck in an airport. He's like, I've been on hold for 5 hours and then it hung up on me, etc. A really horrible experience. I also, as I was consuming this and was just thinking, man, you're just in another endurance event.
You did not. Well, you didn't opt in. That's the difference. You didn't opt in.
Yeah, you didn't opt in, and you're
Totally.
ready to tap out, and I get it. It sounded absolutely horrible, but I mean that's kind of the nature of life. However things are going, there's always a wave that's rising behind you while you're paddling that you might not see, and you can either stand up and surf, or like you're gonna have a bad day.
Absolutely.
Right?
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just from a more functional point of view, I'm curious, how do you all think about, as you look ahead at maybe the next 6-12 months, everything that you've got going on, Kristen with the coaching, Nick with the things that you're doing professionally, how do you kind of pick out what's the next challenge going to be, and how do you like do the Jenga or Tetris of fitting that into the rest of your life?
Boy, that's quite a question.
Yeah, the eternal question. Yeah. Well, I think, it was a really clear goal this year for me, and put everything into that. And, we sacrificed, time with family and time at home for that. And so for me, I feel like that was a huge relief. It was a great experience, a great finish, but it's also been a big relief. And I've also been really looking forward to not having that next big thing on the calendar or next event that I'm planning on. So I don't know. I'm really focused on just getting back up to speed on all the work and just getting kind of ahead with a lot of the stuff I'm working on professionally. Um, so my mindset has kind of transitioned that way, and then also to like, okay, we've focused on me for long enough here now, Nick. Like what's your next thing, and how can we get you, working together to really focus on
Well,
that
at
as
the risk
well.
of going into like
So
marriage counseling advice or marriage advice, I think that Kristen and I go for a morning walk with our dogs almost every morning. And, we have our phones with us, but we're not on our phones. We're out in the woods. We're not in front of a screen. It's just the two of us, unless we bump into a neighbor. And I think if, it wasn't actually by design. It's just the dogs need a walk, but I think we actually kind of process a lot of what we have and what we want to do and how we prioritize different things in our lives on those walks, because it's just the two of us. And Kristen's absolutely right. Like we made sacrifices for her prep for Unbound this year. I mean, and we're happy to do it, because we are fully invested together on that mission. And we're already talking about something I might want to try next year, and how we build the next 6 months or a year around that, to some extent. Um, and again, I don't want to just gush about my wife, but like we work hard on our relationship, and which is, I think it's just another exercise in mindset and compassion. Just like, I mean, you talked about domain specificity, but it's just another space to apply what we learn. So yeah, I mean, it's not easy. Like I don't get a lot of nights in my own bed with my work. I work for Shimano in marketing, and I'm at a lot of events, and we were just scouting an event together, which was cool. And um, but yeah, and then just carving out quiet moments. But we get it done. And then I think the biggest thing we've learned as we've gotten older is just slowing down the number of things we're taking on. And we are very focused on quality instead over quantity. I mean, we say that now. Lifetime Grand Prix last year was a lot. It was awesome. Um, but again, it was kind of a singular focus for us, So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's a lot of it is just communication.
Yeah, definitely. So it sounds like there's a bit of like a slingshot effect where one of you picks a big audacious goal, the other partner is, I'm sure that you're still training and doing cool stuff, also doing professional things, helping to enable your partner, and then you kind of pay it forward and the other person gets the arm
Yeah,
sling like you're in a
that's a
Madison
nice
race
analogy.
for anyone
Yeah,
out there who's
yeah.
conversant
yeah.
in track racing, right? So you're getting the arm sling and like throwing up the road. Good luck. You better win because we put a lot of time into this. We don't want to be disappointed. Have you ever
Right.
like when's the last? I mean, Nick, you mentioned that you had a couple of DNFs in Tour Divide and some other events. So it sounds like you're the person in the family finishing less events in aggregate. No,
I
I'm
was
just
starting
giving
to
you a
think
hard
about it. I
time.
was like, man, am I?
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
No.
I don't know, but for both of you, can you think of an event or something like Tour Divide, which I guess that's just like so monumental. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around completing that. But for both of you, can you think of a time you've picked one of these big goals? You all have had to orient your whole life around it, and it just went sideways.
Tour Divide. I mean, Kristen is a really successful rider, and I'm, what am I saying by that? Like completion is one thing with her events, and you're never guaranteed a finish, but Kristen is a podium contender. She's at that level, and but it doesn't mean you haven't had disappointment. Like Tour Divide is big, but like if you've poured yourself into something and it hasn't gone the way you wanted it, the disappointment can be just as big. It's not the duration that matters in the end with these things and how we react to them. Um, I mean, you had some issues, Kristen, at like that first Unbound. Neither of us finished the first Unbound. Sorry, Unbound XL. Um, I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is like your relationship with failure. It's an important one, and you can decide that it's fuel for your fire. And I think Kristen has very much done that with XL. And or it can just be disappointment and resentment and spiral. So I'm not trying to dodge your question. I just like, but conversely, like I'm not at the front of the races I'm doing, I don't have that killer instinct the way that Kristen does, and I'm perhaps not as gifted athletically. So we approach our events really differently. And so for me, it's just really about, but ultimately, w- success for us, while it might externally look a little different, it's really all just about execution. It's about doing the thing well, doing the work, preparing, and then executing it. And so, if Kristen is winning or I'm completing, like it's still the same process in a way, you know? I mean, that's how I kind of look at it.
Yeah. No, I think yeah, like anybody, we both have our, quote unquote failures out there, whether it's not finishing or not having the race that we wanted and that kind of thing. But I think thankfully we both just love riding bikes. And so yeah, there are sacrifices and there are things that we put off because we're training for something specifically. But I think we also both just really enjoy, as Nick was saying, we enjoy the process of training, of prepping and working together on that. And so I think we get disappointed when those failures happen, but it's not this life-changing thing where we don't want to ride our bikes anymore. Or, we're not just going to give up on that event. I think for both of us, yeah, like Tour Divide, going back to Tour Divide multiple years, Nick, I think like each year just gave him more fuel. And I think that's a really important thing to remind ourselves. It doesn't have to be in the moment, right after the failure or like the hard race. You're like, I never want to do that again. And that's fine. It's okay to be disappointed and be mad or, upset about it. But then you have to just be able to move on from it and take what you can from it. And I think that, again, it takes practice failing. And we've practiced that plenty of times. So.
And whether you complete an event, don't complete it, or in the case of the XL, you win it, Kristen, what does recovery look like after, like XL, or like, I'd love to hear about what it feels like after, after the Tour Divide to
Yeah.
imagine it's a little rough. But I mean, all of these things, I kind of can't conceive of what the recovery process might feel like. And I'm imagining it's probably multi-week, but you've actually lived it. So can you tell me about it?
Yeah. Well, for the shorter stuff that I've done, it's way more mental recovery for me than physical. My back was hurting pretty bad this year for probably like 3 or 4 days, but that was really the only thing that gave me too much problem out there. So thankfully I was, low energy, but kind of back to normal pretty quickly. But the desire to train to kind of do any riding with purpose, that's still, I mean, I'm still in the point where I'm kind of like, yeah, I could, I'll ride my bike. I do some mountain bike rides. I'm going to go look for some wildflowers, but it's taking some time to get the fire back. So for me, it's always a much bigger mental recovery, but Tour Divide's a whole nother story. So
Yeah, Tour
of
Divide took a
recovery.
while. I mean, I was just, I mean, you're sleep deprived. I lost, I think, 15 pounds, and so you're putting
Yeah,
weight back on. All these things, and but ultimately, like I actually was back on my bike after Tour Divide pretty quickly because well, at least that year, that was still about 5 years ago. But I mean, Kristen and I went and did Trans South Dakota not too long after that, and just kind of toured it together, if you recall, Kristen. And yeah, I don't know. Like,
mhm.
I guess my head was just like, well, we're just gonna ride bikes forever now. Let's just keep doing that. So I mean, I definitely got a lot of sleep in after that, but I just was like fuzzy. I just was like kind of, what am I saying? I was kind of stoned, just kind of like, I'm gonna just watch some more TV. I can't do anything right now. But you just come back from that slowly but surely. And I think the wisdom is like that Kristen doesn't have another event right now, that she's panicked about. It's creating that space for yourself to recover. And it was the same as Tour Divide. It's not like I was, and this is the beauty of like Chris and I were joking, she's like a part-time pro, and I'm not even close to a pro. So we can create our schedules. We have ultimate versatility, flexibility. So wisdom is it not in throwing something in directly after a big effort like that.
What's your relationship with sleep like outside of these
Awesome.
events?
Huge. It's a very important relationship. No, I love the science behind sleep and just trying to hack sleep a little bit more. Not definitely not perfect at it, but just there's a lot of great research out there, a lot of good books, which sounds like you're into this as well. But trying to create those systems, your bedtime system, routine, getting into really good habits. So it depends on what I'm doing, but yeah, I mean, I think, really starting to wind things down at night, trying to, prevent yourself from being on screens as much as possible, sometimes better than others at that. But then it's all of the things that we're told, right? Like sleeping at a lower temperature, keeping your body cool, and eye mask, earplugs. Again, I don't do this all the time, but if it's something that's important that's coming up, or I know I really need that sleep, I'll focus on that really specifically, because you can feel such. I mean, it's so huge when you're getting really good sleep. Um, it's incredible. Like you feel like a superhuman, and I think a lot of us don't do that on a regular basis. And so we're just accustomed to kind of being this, 75% of ourselves, and that's normal. But then when you actually do put in the work and you're at that 100%, it's incredible. So it's again one of those things it's easier to talk about than always doing, but that's something
Yeah,
it's
Kristen's
good
taught
when
me
it
a lot about
happens.
that. I think you became fascinated with the power of sleep. And we've always been like good sleepers, for the most part. But Kristen has really done a lot of reading and listening about sleep hygiene, and we share a bed, so I get to learn from her. I mean, I'm the aero nerd and she's the sleep nerd, so we each bring our own interests to the tables, I guess. So
What's the best way to say arrow and
oof,
run?
abandon all hope.
It's a joke. It's a joke. It's a joke. No, I'm sorry. Like, yeah,
Go
it just,
around it.
would this be a podcast in 2023 if we didn't talk broadly about sleep science? And would it be
Yeah.
a cycling podcast if I didn't ask about being arrow while moving at like 3 miles per hour walking?
Right.
Trust me, if you're not into cycling and you're listening to this, that was probably like one of the best jokes you're going to hear this entire year. All right. So I want to know, what events have you said no to? I'm always part of how I find things that I'm curious in, which probably totally fucks up my sleep, is I just go into YouTube wormholes. I used to do it as a journalist and I found tons of interesting things to write about. And what does this say about me and social media's control of my mind and free will? I don't know, but I have found some interesting things. And when it comes to cycling, it's taken me to things like, as I mentioned, the Atlas race, which just seems absolutely banana to me. There's a YouTuber, Tristan rides bikes. I don't even know his last name. I want to get him on the podcast. He did that one. There's the thing that Chris
And
Case just
Celtic.
did, I believe, in Ireland, which seemed yeah, that just seemed totally bananas. There are a lot of events like that, so there's starting to be this blurring between just, wow, that's lunatic fringe ram type stuff in 1983, and that's just kind of the direction things are going. And it's not just happening in cycling. So I'm sure you've seen in ultra
Yeah,
running, like the Moab 240, who had that
it's
bad
incredible.
idea. I don't know
Oh
what's
my
wrong with you.
gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but what events do you all look at and say, no way, we're not touching that? I mean, Nick, it just seems like you don't have an upper limit. You did Tour Divide. I don't know what's wrong with
Well,
you, but yeah, like, what do you think?
I can
What's
answer
like
pretty
a hard
quickly for
no for you?
myself, and to be honest, like I don't want to do mega
Okay.
multi-day, especially self-supported events on road anymore. Like I just don't, when they've done the Trans
Yeah.
America race, I just think the combination of sleep deprived cyclist plus motorist is just a bad one. Um, and I'm not judging anyone who does it, but we all have our own risk assessment that we have to undertake. And for me, that's just a hard no. But I'll do things like the 12-hour World Time Trials Championships, which is on just it's on a loop, and you have a crew, and like that to me is super super interesting. I've done that one twice, and there's part of me that's like, well, maybe I should do the 24. But and I'll also yeah,
Don't let him do it,
and I'll
Kristen. Don't
also
let him do it.
say, like for me, I
No,
haven't
no,
gotten
Nick.
as much into the big single track stuff either. Tour Divide is mostly like it's basically like gravel. it's just really long gravel. And Kristen has showed more interest in like Colorado Trail. Like I don't have a ton of interest in the Colorado Trail. I'm pretty interested in Arizona Trail and like having to hike the Grand Canyon rim to rim with a bike on your back, and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
to me, it's almost always just a safety concern, and I'm willing to take on risks that um, I feel that I can manage or own. Like the idea of an ITI in Alaska is I'm becoming more comfortable with that idea, as I learn more from people who've done it. But you're not worried about a car, someone on a cell phone barreling down on you. And for whatever reason, that risk seems bigger than I want to take.
Mhm. Hmm. I think I don't know how to answer that because I think I've built my career on just saying yes to stupid things, and long events that people are like, "Hey, we have this idea. We should do these 2 back-to-back races that are across the state, but it'll be awesome." And I'm like, "Great, sign me up. I'm in. Sounds like a lot of fun." And then it's not. Um, but yeah, I'm with Nick. I think anything on the road is pretty out of the question for me at this point. But and then, beyond cycling, yeah, I don't know. There's a secret part of me that wants to do the Leadville 100 run. Um, but my knees will probably never let me do that, thankfully. But yeah, I don't know. I think I go beyond the bike, and just these long events interest me in other ways too, because at least right now the bike feels really controlled and I know my levels and my what I can do out there. I can kind of know my limits. And then other things, whether it's hiking or running or like kayaking or whatever it is, that's a really big unknown for me. And I think that's fun when you don't know if you can do something. So I don't know. We'll see, but for now, bikes are pretty good.
Now, this is something I've never done on this show before, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I kind of do want to put you on the spot. What is the quality that you admire most about your partner?
You
It's
can go first.
the first thing that comes to my mind is Kristen's incredible capacity for work. Um, she is she never seems daunted by the amount of work on her plate, whether that's professional, the effort she puts into her family life, and then certainly the bike. Like she can just rally, and just double down. And I'm not built that same way. Like it's harder for me to string that together, and I feel like I need bigger pauses, bigger quiet times between big efforts, and she seems to be more resilient. Um, so yeah, her capacity for work is mind blowing to me.
Um, yeah, where to start? No, I think almost a different side of it. Nick, you talked a little bit about some of your favorite things being the community and getting to ride with people and meet people along the way. And I think that's like, I admire that because when I'm in a race, I'm like so focused on, what do I need to do? It's a very selfish thing. I feel like my racing and the friendships that you've made on those big rides and the people you connect with and the communities you connect with. I think that's really cool. And I think it's something that is what makes these big events, these long rides so special because you have the time to really make that connection with people. So, yeah, I'm going to try harder to do that in future events and
Thanks,
races because I
Kristen,
think it's pretty sweet.
Kristen, I can relate to that. Yeah,
and thanks,
that
Andrew.
is
It's a
that
good
is really
question.
great. I appreciate you both. No, no, I appreciate you both being open to sharing that. And I was gonna say, Kristen, I can relate to that. Just like being totally zoned in to what you're doing during a race. And in fact, my wife used to yell at me because when I would be, I would be like mid pack in an elite Masters cyclocross race in the Bay Area, and she'd be there with my son Sam when he was a baby, and I would just like not even, I just couldn't even, I didn't even know they were there.
Right.
And then I finally got, she's like, look, you gotta wave when you come around on the lap. It's like, and it's like, you know, I'm definitely like, wasn't on the podium. I had ex-professional athletes lapping me. I just was very focused and committed to what I was doing. So over time, I started to wave, but I wasn't racing for 24 plus hours. And yeah, but thank you both so much for being here and for being so open and sharing so much in this conversation. I really appreciate what you both are doing. It's incredibly inspiring, and I'm grateful that we had the chance to have this
Thanks,
chat. So
Jared.
thanks for being here.